next we have Ashley Spillane from Impactual. Ashley, thanks for joining us. Ashley, so for those of you who need a little bit of context, you were one of the people behind Rock the Vote all those many years ago, right? One of the best examples of making voting cool, right?
I was not a founder, but I was involved as running the organization later in its history.
One of the organizations. And so tell us a little bit about Impactual and what it's all about now.
Yeah, so I started a small consulting firm called Impactual to advise brands and philanthropists on how to do civic engagement work better and more powerfully and impactfully, just to make sure that, you know, as I see it, so much of what we do every day, the challenges we encounter, the solutions we celebrate, are really centered around how we self-govern as a society. And having a say in that self-governance is really important, and not enough people in our country are taking advantage of the opportunity they have to make decisions about how we govern and what policies affect us. You know, in any given election, you have between 40 and 60% of the population that sit out. And I think we need to really shift as Americans towards a culture of voting and being civically engaged. And I think that companies and brands have a huge role to play in helping us do that.
Amazing. Well, thank you for the introduction. Let's dive in and let's see what's going on with regard to 2020.
Yeah, well, speaking of letting people see their own power, we have a huge election ahead of us in 180 days. You know, we're obviously in the midst of a really difficult time, and what is a complicated time for voting, since it's a practice that most Americans do on a single day in November, and in person at busy polling places, all of the things that we are asked to stay clear of right now in the middle of COVID-19. But as Therese was saying, you know, people are feeling a duty and a responsibility and an ambition to pull all of the levers available to them to help make their lives better, to help make sure that their neighbors and their families are taken care of, and to leave a positive legacy. And one of the ways to do that is through voting. And so I wanted to start by saying we will vote in 2020. We will have an election. This is mandated in the Constitution. And we have a history as Americans of voting in really difficult times of crisis in our past, the Civil War, the two world wars. And so I put a great amount of hope in the fact that we have this anchor point ahead of us where we will cast a ballot, but it's not going to be without challenges. One of the things that we have in this country, in all 50 states, we have different laws that regulate whether to be registered to vote before you go to the polls or not. And when I was at Rock the Vote, we often saw that on election day was the day that so many people would come to the website and try to get registered to vote, not realizing that it's something that you have to do before the election in your state in order to participate. And so one of the things that has been really helpful since the early 90s through the Voting Rights Act and the voter registration programs has been that you're able to register to vote at the DMVs, at your Department of Motor Vehicles, when you're getting your license or you're moving and updating your address. And in 2016, there were about 25 million people in that election cycle that registered to vote at their local DMVs. And in 2020, we projected that number would be higher. However, now with DMVs closed, we're estimating that 8 to 10 million people who would otherwise register in that way won't be getting registered. That's not to account for the number of voter registration efforts that tend to happen outside your local grocery store or at a concert where young people might sign up, or at their college campus, where those programs are also being shut down. The other challenge is that we need people to be available to work at the elections. We've just seen in Wisconsin real challenges identifying enough people to serve as poll workers and to go in their local community and greet the voters coming in, get them all set up to vote. It's a really important job. Almost 60% of the people in our country who do it are over the age of 60, usually retirees in the community who are offering that service up. And in November, depending on where we are with this pandemic and this public health crisis, we're really going to need a lot more young, healthy people who can serve as poll workers. The other thing is that we have a decentralized election system. All 50 states get to make up their rules and regulations, and so it's not the case that everyone in America, without an excuse, can request an absentee ballot or vote early in person. Those rules differ. There are certainly more states coming online regularly, and with COVID-19, a lot of states are changing their rules so that you don't have to submit an excuse. But we don't have a culture of voting 100% vote by mail across this country, and so we know that people will need a lot of help getting clear on what the rules are, what the forms are that they have to figure out in order to make sure that they get their ballots. If they are voting by mail, if they're going to vote early in person, where lines might be decreased, they'll need help navigating where those locations are that they can go. And then we also need to make sure that there are places available on election day for people who aren't able to do the first two, voting by mail or in person. And so I talk a lot. I talk a lot with companies and brands about what they can do to make a real difference. And I have long been a huge fan of engaging brands to help change the culture we have around voting. And this year, it has just become even more important. I think as we were looking at that research in the first presentation, we are looking at companies and brands as needing to be a part of solving problems. And the upcoming election has a couple of them that we really need a lot of help with. One of them is around voter registration. So I shared there's going to be a lot of people who aren't automatically registered through their local DMVs, a lot of people who don't have access to voter registration forms or reminders from people in their community. We are going to need as much help as possible from brands to help promote voter registration early and often, whether that's on your website, through your social platforms, email accounts. If you're delivering actual physical products to people during this time, throwing in the national voter registration form alongside of it with the location that they can return it to, all very important. If we do move to a system where voters are being either automatically mailed ballots to their address or are having to request mailed ballots, you have to be registered at the address to which the ballot is going to be mailed. So this puts a real premium on voter registration in 2020. We will also have a huge amount of education to do about sharing when to request an absentee ballot or a vote by mail ballot and how to request it. What's the form in your state? What's the system you have to go through? There are some amazing digital platforms and nonprofit partners that do provide people the opportunity to both register to vote and request absentee ballots online. And if there is a mail component or a print and mail component to it, they'll actually print and send you your information so you can submit it. There's also, I think, going to be, we've seen this just during the primaries in this first little bit of the pandemic this year. States are trying to grapple with what to do themselves and trying to figure out, should we postpone our primary? Should we hold it but change the locations? If we don't have enough workers, do we have to scale back the number of locations that we have available for people to vote at? All of that makes an already pretty confusing process even more confusing. And so making sure that we're sharing, nonpartisan, nonprofit resources that people can contact to get help and navigate through is really important. We love the 866 Our Vote hotline. You can text or call and ask your questions, and they will connect you with local, your state-based volunteer lawyers who help answer those questions. As I said, we're going to need a lot more people signing up to be poll workers. So there's a great resource, workelections.com. People can promote if you have employees or consumers. As Kafir was saying, there's a lot of people that want to be called into action right now and want to be really positively participating and contributing to their local community. This is another great way to do that. And then, just from a brand perspective, getting really vocal about your support for safe and secure voting options for employees and consumers is important. I was saying this before the call, but there's a lot of politics around right now. There's a lot of federal conversations happening about the politics around absentee and early voting. These are not as true state to state. The election officials in these states, they all want to do their job well. They want to make sure that people have access to vote, and whatever we can be doing to help support them and help make sure that they have the backing that they need to move forward with the reforms that they'll need to help the elections go smoothly is really important. A couple of resources that we love and are available to folks who are thinking about getting involved. There's a nonprofit organization called the Civic Alliance, where you can get a full suite of resources, including toolkits or regular email updates that help you navigate what the tentpole moments are throughout the election cycle for when you should be sort of engaging your folks or submitting calls to action. There's a really robust network of corporations that also convene and share information with each other about programs that they're running, programs they've run in the past, the aspects that worked, that didn't work. And it's a really lovely space where companies are sharing with each other how to do this work. There are two great holidays, National Voter Registration Day on September 22nd and Vote Early Day on October 24th. That are two distinct nonprofit efforts that help engage people and just try to raise awareness, use it as a really catalyzing moment to raise awareness about the different opportunities that you have. And it's a really wonderful thing we see every year. Tons of companies post about this. You have people from all political parties posting and trying to celebrate and raise awareness around these days. As I mentioned before, one of the nonprofits that does provide online voter registration and absentee ballot resources, you can actually get a custom link for your brand from this organization, TurboVote, and they'll send you a link that can be specific to your company. And then whenever you promote that, whether that's in email to your employees or consumers, or you're posting it publicly on social media, it'll actually allow you to track what kind of impact you're having. And I love that so much for companies, because it really allows you to see whether you're making an impact and whether people are taking advantage of the resources you're giving out. And then there's another great group called Pizza to the Polls. And much like what we've heard today, depending on what happens in November and whether there's the capacity to bring pizzas to the polls, they historically have delivered pizzas to polling locations that have long lines, just to keep people happy and well fed while they wait in line to cast their ballot. They will likely continue to deliver food to poll workers and to voters in 2020. They're also thinking about what kinds of supplies can they be packaging up to send to poll workers too. So, we might have to talk after about this mask program to see if we can get people to start helping with producing those for poll workers. But they're a great resource as well. And then one quick opportunity, it's a very real, recent, now immediate opportunity to take advantage of. There is a coalition of brands that is coming together to put out an ad in the Wall Street Journal on Tuesday, just reiterating their support for these safe and secure options of early voting. And so to the extent that there are any companies on the call or watching this that are interested in signing up, you can do so at voteearlyday.org. And I will post this presentation along with, there's a couple of other great guides to how to get involved in the election on our website, impactual.com/resources. I also co-authored a case study on behalf of the Harvard Kennedy School's Ash Center with Sophia Gross from Snapchat. And there's a ton of great resources in that if anyone's interested in digging in further. And we're always happy to be helpful.